This is The Courage of the Truth, lectures by Michel Foucault at the College of France, 1983-84. Lecture number 6, the second hour, given on March 7th, 1984. Forgive me, I have taken too long with this general presentation of cynicism. I would like now to return to the problem which concerns and interests me, and in which cynicism plays at least an important, if not exclusive, role. The problem is the following. As I was saying last week, cynicism presents itself essentially as a certain form of parrhesia, of truth-telling, but which finds its instrument, its site, its point of emergence in the very life of the person who must thus manifest or speak the truth in the form of a manifestation of existence. Everything I have just been saying to you was a way of finding in the general characteristics of cynicism the elements which enable us to understand how and why the cynic's truth-telling takes the privileged form of life as testimony of the truth. From one end to the other, from Diogenes, to whom Lucian attributes the assertion that he is the prophet of the truth, very precisely of parrhesia, prophetes parrhesias, to Gregory of Nazianzus, saying of Maximus, both Christian ascetic and true philosopher, that he is martyron aletheus, bears witness, testifies to the truth. Cynicism appears as this way of manifesting the truth, of practicing alethurgy, the production of truth in the form of life. It seems to me that I have found a theme here, which obviously should be developed much more than I have been able to do in this framework, which was really very important in ancient philosophy, in Christian spirituality, much less in contemporary philosophy, no doubt, but certainly in what could be called political ethics since the 19th century. This is the theme of the true life. What is the true life, given that our mental framework, our way of thinking leads us, not without problems, to think of how a statement can be true or false, how a statement can have a truth value, then what meaning can we give to this expression, true life? What meaning can we give to this expression of true life when talking about life? And the same could be said with regard to a form of behavior, a feeling, or an attitude. How can we qualify it as true? What is a true feeling? What is true love? What is the true life? This problem of the true life has been absolutely crucial in the history of our philosophical or spiritual thought. I would like to refer to this theme of the true life in a general way, but taking cynicism as the point of application. First of all, this is what I would like to analyze for you now, even before cynicism or alongside it. What did Greek philosophy understand by the true life? This expression is sometimes found in a not insignificant number of times in Plato. Before addressing the question of the true life, aletheis bios, alethinos bios, I will give some extremely elementary reminders about the notion of truth itself. Aletheia, the truth. Aletheis, true. In classical Greek thought, what is generally understood by aletheia, what is aletheis, true, I think we can, once again, forgive me, very schematically, distinguish four meanings or see four forms in which, according to which, and because of which, something may be said to be true. First, of course, forgive me for reminding you of this, that which is not hidden, not concealed, is true. The negative structure of the term aletheia, aletheis, is frequently found in Greek. The word atrekes, for example, which means straight, etymologically means quite precisely not curved. Nemertes, which means sincere, etymologically signifies which does not deceive, does not dupe. The aletheis is that which, not being hidden, not concealed, is given to view in its entirety, is completely visible, no part of it being concealed or secret. First value of the word aletheis, but not only is that which is not concealed called aletheis, true, but also that which is not added to or supplemented, which is not mixed with something other than itself, that whose being is not only not hidden or concealed, but also whose being is not altered by any foreign element which would thus distort it and end up concealing what it is in reality, is aletheis. Third meaning, that which is straight, euthus, direct, is aletheis. This rectitude is the opposite of twists and turns which precisely conceal it. For that which is true, being euthus, is also opposed to the multiplicity and mixture which distorts. From this point of view, that aletheia is straight, that aletheia, the truth, is also a rectitude, derives directly from the fact that the truth is not concealed and is without multiplicity and unalloyed. So it will be quite natural to say that conduct and a way of doing things are aletheia, inasmuch as they are straight, in accordance with rectitude, with what is right. Finally, the fourth meaning, the fourth value of the term aletheia is that which exists and remains beyond any change, which remains in its identity, immutability, and incorruptibility, by virtue of the fact that it is without deviation, concealment, mixture, curvature, or disturbance. It is really straight. This unconcealed, unalloyed, and straight truth can thereby remain what it is in its unchangeable and incorruptible identity. These are, very schematically, the four essential values that can be found in these terms, aletheia and aletheia. You see then that this notion of truth, with its different values and field of meanings, divided up according to these four axes, can be applied to many things other than propositions and statements. This notion of truth as the unconcealed, the unalloyed, the straight, and the unchanging and incorruptible is applicable either in all four of its meanings or in one or some of them. Two ways of being, ways of doing things, ways of conducting oneself, or forms of action. Moreover, this notion of truth, with its four meanings, is applied to logos itself. Not to logos understood as proposition, as statement, but logos as way of speaking. Logos aletheia is not just a set of propositions which turn out to be exact and can take the value of truth. Logos aletheia is a way of speaking in which, first, nothing is concealed, in which, second, neither the false, nor opinion, nor appearance is mixed with the true. Third, it is a straight discourse in line with the rules and the law. And finally, aletheia's logos is a discourse which remains the same, does not change or become debased. or distorted, and which can never be vanquished, overturned, or refuted. But you understand also how and why these same words, aletheia and aletheia, can be applied to something other than logos. There is at least one domain in which the application of this qualifying term, aletheia, was of major importance. We should no doubt focus on this for a moment, at least by way of an invitation to think about it. For this description in terms of truth will certainly have considerable importance in Western culture. This is quite simply the notion of aletheia eros, true love. What is this strange, remarkable notion, this true love, which is crucial in Platonic philosophy, of course, but generally in Greek ethics? Well, in true love we find precisely the values I have just been talking about. True love is first love which does not conceal, and it does not conceal in two senses. First, it does not conceal because it has nothing to hide. It has nothing shameful which has to be hidden. It does not shun the light. It is willing, and is such that it is always willing to show itself in front of witnesses. It is also a love which does not conceal its aims. True love does not hide the true objective that it seeks to obtain from the one it loves. It is without subterfuge and does not employ roundabout means with its partner. It does not keep itself out of sight of witnesses or of its partner. True love is love without disguise. Second, true love is an unalloyed love, that is to say, without mixture of pleasure and displeasure. It is also a love in which sensual pleasure and the friendship of souls do not intermingle. To that extent, it is therefore a pure love because unalloyed. Third, true love, aletheia eros, is love in which is in line with what is right, with what is correct. It is a direct ethos love. It has nothing contrary to the rule or custom. And finally, true love is love which is never subject to change or becoming. It is an incorruptible love which remains always the same. If you look at the definition, description, and portrait of true love in the Socratic and Platonic texts, it is easy to find these four values of aletheia. And I think that this definition of true love may enable us to make some headway in the investigation of the nature of the true life. which is our problem now. Moreover, it is not entirely without significance that true love was in Platonic philosophy, but also, as you know, in a whole sector, a whole domain of Christian spirituality and mysticism, the form par excellence of the true life. Since Platonism, true love and the true life have traditionally belonged together, and to a large extent, Christian Platonism will take up this theme. Let's leave this, but it would be a very interesting and vast domain to study. Now we come to the alethese bios, which I would like to locate first of all outside of its cynic sense and the very paradoxical and curious form it takes in cynicism. Take the true life as it appears in the philosophical texts of the classical epoch, essentially in Plato, but you can find at least some rudiments of it, less interesting, less developed for sure, in Xenophon. Let's take this definition. I am not going to try to take the notion of alethese bios in its final philosophical elaboration in Plato, but in its obvious everyday meanings which we find in the Platonic texts, apart from any particular philosophical elaboration. The alethese bios is first, of course, an unconcealed life, that is to say, a life which does not harbor any shadowy parts. It is a life which can face the full light of day and appear without reticence to the sight of all. A way of being and of conducting oneself, therefore, is true and falls within the domain of the true life if it hides nothing of its intentions and aims. There is a reference to this conception of the true life as life which does not conceal anything. In the Lesser Hippias, paragraphs 364 and 365a, which concerns the famous parallel, the frequently invoked contrast between Ulysses and Achilles. The text Socrates quotes at this point is from the Iliad, Book 9, in which Achilles, speaking to Ulysses and calling him ingenious Ulysses, Polumikon Odysseus, says to him, I must tell you my intentions straightforwardly, as I will carry them out, and as I know they will be accomplished. I detest as much as the doors of Hades the person who hides one thing in his mind and says something else. Commenting on Achilles' challenge to Ulysses, Socrates says, Ulysses is the man Polutropotatos, the man of 1,000 roundabout means. That is to say, the man who hides from his partners what he has in mind and wants to do. On the other hand, as opposed to Ulysses, Achilles, who precisely has just said to the ingenious Ulysses, "I will tell you my intentions straightforwardly, as I will carry them out, not only as I want to carry them out, but as I will in actual fact carry them out, as I know I will carry them out," appears as the man of truth, without circumlocution, between what he thinks and what he says, between what he says and what he wants to do, between what he wants to do and what he will in actual fact do. There is no concealment, no deviation, nothing which hides the reality of what he thinks and what will be the reality of what he does. We are in broad daylight, and Socrates says of Achilles, "Here's a man hap lustatos kai alithistatos," the simplest, most direct, and truest. Haplos, someone straightforward. The conjunction haplos aletheis is fairly frequent when referring to a man, a character, an existence, a form of life. The coupling of haplous and aletheis is found in Book 2 of the Republic, where in this case, what is characterized as truth, true life, true mode of being, is the God's existence, which the Republic says is simple and true. Haplun kai aletheis, straightforward and true. Simple and true in deeds and words, God does not change himself, and nor does he deceive others by phantoms or discourse, or by signs sent in waking or in dreams. So you can see how this simplicity, which is truth of existence, true life, is characterized here. No change, but no possibility of deceptions being produced by this disconnection, the discrepancy between what happens in discourse, phantoms and signs. The second value of the expression alethis bios corresponds to what I was just telling you, namely that alethis designated what is without mixture. In Plato, the alethis bios appears as the unalloyed life, without mixture of good and evil, pleasure and suffering, vice and virtue. A true life is one which cannot be variegated. All that well-known variegation of the part of the soul which is susceptible to lust or irascible, of democratic or tyrannical cities, in which all desires have a place, in their violence or singularity, is precisely what gets in the way of leading the true life. That the variegated man, the man prey to the multiplicity of his desires, appetites, and impulses of his soul, is not capable of the truth is precisely what is said in the description of the democratic man in Book 8 of the Republic. This is how Plato describes him. He establishes then a sort of equality between the pleasures, and he lives by giving up the command of his soul to the first comer until he has his fill of it. Then he abandons himself to another, treating them on an equal footing. Today he is intoxicated by the sound of the flute. Tomorrow he diets. Sometimes he exercises in the gymnasium. Sometimes he is idle and cares about nothing. And at other times one might think him buried deep in philosophy. He is often a politician, leaping onto the platform and saying and doing whatever comes into his head. This life of the democratic man, sometimes idle and at others busy, sometimes given over to pleasure and at others to politics, and when given over to politics, saying anything and everything that comes into his head. This life without unity, this mixed life dedicated to multiplicity, is a life without truth. It is unable, Plato says, to give way to logos aletheis, true discourse. We can quote another text in which the true life is contrasted this way with the life of mixture. At the end of the Critias, Plato quickly evokes the decadence of Atlantis. This is just before the text breaks off, the end of which is lost. And he explains, after the happy life that men were able to lead in Atlantis, a time came when the share, the part given by the gods to the men of Atlantis, became mixed with many mortal elements. This mixture of the divine share, which characterized the true life of the men of Atlantis, with mortal elements, is what caused their fall from the true life, from its happiness and accompanying beauty. When life is mixed, it is no longer the true life. Third, in Plato, the true life is a straight life, according to the characterization of truth as rectitude, of the true as that which is straight. The true life is a straight life, that is to say, a life in line with the principles, the rules, the nomos. In his famous letter 7, Plato recounts how he was led to go to Sicily at Dion's request, and how he hesitated to accept this invitation, but he let himself be persuaded when he realized how easily Dion had accepted his principles and modeled his life according to the rules he gave him. Dion's conversion to philosophy, the training he received anyway, allowed Plato to hope that through Dion, the city of Syracuse, and maybe the whole of Sicily, would agree to settle down under this form of law. And he says, there was the hope of everyone having an alethenos bios, a true life. The true life, which is Plato's promise to the Sicilians, or rather his hope when he went to Sicily, is life according to the rules that Plato, that philosophy, can propose not just to men in their individual life, as in the case of Dion, but also in their social life, their public and political life. These are the laws, the political order that Plato wants to propose to the Sicilians and the Syracusans. This passage may be brought together with one from the Gorgias, in which we also find this notion of the true life. It is right at the end when Plato is referring to the judgment of souls. In the myth of the Gorgias, we see the souls presenting themselves after death to those who will be their judges, and in particular to Rhadamanthus. Socrates says Rhadamanthus, the judge of souls in the underworld, will no doubt have his work cut out. The souls of great kings will come before him. He will not let himself be impressed by these souls, for he will see straight away that there is nothing in them that is healthy. Everything is deformed by lies, vanity, and imposture. Nothing is straight. Why is nothing straight? Because this soul has lived without truth, anu aletheia. The license, laxity, pride, and intemperance of its conduct have filled it with disorder and ugliness. Plural, variegated souls, traversed by desire, license, and laxity. Souls without truth. Consequently, Rhadamanthus will send these souls to suffer the punishment they deserve. But Socrates continues, Rhadamanthus also discovers a completely different type of soul. The souls may be of philosophers, or even possibly of citizens like any other ordinary citizen. But whether these souls are the souls of philosophers or of someone like everyone else, they are souls which have lived in a holy way, hosios, and with truth, met aletheia, without dedicating themselves to sterile restlessness. Rhadamanthus admires the beauty of these souls which have lived with truth, and sends them to the Isles of the Blessed. Hence, after this reference to the contrasting destinies of souls, some punished because they have been without truth, the others rewarded and sent to eternal happiness because they have lived with the truth, Socrates resolves, I will strive, through the pursuit of the truth, to make myself as perfect as possible in life and in death. The life with truth is then the straight life. Finally, the fourth meaning, The fourth value of the expression bios alethis, alethinos bios in Plato. The true life is one which shuns disturbance, change, corruption, and the fall, which remains without change in the identity of its being. And it is this identity of life with regard to itself which ensures that it escapes every element of alteration and, on the one hand, assures it a freedom and understood as independence, as non-dependence and non-slavery with regard to everything which could subject it to domination and control, and on the other, assures it happiness, understood as self-mastery and self-enjoyment. We have just seen that this life, this true life, as a life of perfect mastery and complete happiness, was evoked in the Critias. This was the existence of the inhabitants of Atlantis, who led a true and blissful life before their mortal elements mixed with their divine element. The truth of the life is its happiness, its perfect happiness. In the same way, according to fairly analogous values, there is a well-known passage in the Theaetetus 174c to 176a, in which Plato describes the busy, tumultuous life without leisure of those who are familiar with all the problems of practical life and perfectly able to deal with them, but who spend all their time doing so. Plato contrasts this with the life of those who, because they are contemplating the real truth, are clumsy and ridiculous in everyday activities and provoke the laughter of Thracian maidservants. But these people who are so clumsy in everyday life can adapt to the harmony of discourse in order to sing fittingly of the true life lived by the gods and blessed men. The true life is therefore the divine and blessed life. These are, if you like, very schematically and again, without seeking more precise philosophical elaboration as background for the analysis I would now like to make, the recognized meanings of the notion of the true life, alethis bios. What we now have to grasp, I will just begin and we'll develop things next week, is how cynicism played on this notion of alethis bios right at the start of Diogenes' life, recounted by Diogenes Laertius. There's a series of important episodes or allusions. In the first place, there is the reference to the fact that Diogenes was the son of a money changer, a banker, someone who had handled coins and exchanged them against each other. There's also reference to the fact that it was following an embezzlement, to tell the truth, an activity of counterfeiting, that Diogenes or his father were exiled from Sinope, where they were from and where they lived. The third reference, finally, to this problem of money is Diogenes, exiled from Sinope, going to Delphi and asking the god Apollo for advice. And Apollo's advice was supposed to have been to falsify the currency or to change its value. This principle, change the value of the currency, was regularly utilized in the Cynic tradition to two ends. First, to balance, bring together, and establish symmetry between Socrates and Diogenes. Just as Socrates had received from the god of Delphi the prophecy, the indication, the role assignment that he was the wisest man, so in the same way, Diogenes, going to Delphi and asking the god how things stood with himself, gets this answer: change, alter the value of currency. So both Socrates and Diogenes find themselves charged with a mission. This symmetry, this proximity of Socrates and Diogenes will be maintained throughout the Cynic tradition. In the text, he writes in the 4th century against the Cynics and in favor of true cynicism. Julian, who speaks about Diogenes with great respect, never fails to speak of Socrates and Diogenes at the same time. One heard the god's words at Delphi, knew himself to be the wisest man, and sought to know himself. The other received another very different mission from the god at Delphi, which was to change the value of the currency. So there is symmetry between these two characters. The second meaning of this imperative is obviously much more difficult to pinpoint. What in fact does alter the value of the currency mean? It is around this theme that I will try to develop the problem of the Cynic true life next week. For now, I would just like to point out that what should be stressed first of all with this theme of change, alter the value of the currency, is the connection indicated by the word itself between currency and custom, rule, law. Nomisma is currency. Nomos is the law. To change the value of the currency is also to adopt a certain standpoint towards convention, rule, or law. Second, still with regard to this notion of parakaraxis, parakaratin, change, alter, does not mean devalue the money. We can sometimes find the important sense of defacing a coin so that it loses its value. But here the verb essentially and especially signifies starting from a certain coin, which carries a certain effigy. Erase that effigy and replace it with another which will enable this coin to circulate with its true value. That the coin is not misleading about its true value, that its own value is restored to it by stamping it with another better and more adequate effigy, is what is defined by this important Cynic principle of altering and changing the value of the currency. It seems to me, and I will end with this and continue with it next week, that what is involved in cynicism regarding the true life is, first of all, actually taking up the coin of the alethys bios and taking it back as close as possible to its traditional meaning. From this perspective, the cynics do not, as it were, change the metal itself on this coin, but they want to modify its effigy, and on the basis of the same principles of the true life, which must be unconcealed, unalloyed, straight, stable, incorruptible, and happy, by going to the extreme consequence without a break, simply by pushing these themes to their extreme consequence, they reveal a life which is precisely the very opposite of what was traditionally recognized as the true life. Taking up the coin again, changing its effigy, and, as it were, making the theme of the true life grimace. Cynicism as the grimace of the true life. The cynics tried to make the traditional philosophical theme of the true life grimace, instead of seeing cynicism as a philosophy which broke with the themes of the true life because it was popular, or because it was never accepted by the educated philosophical consensus and community. It should rather be seen as taking these themes to their extreme consequence, and as an extrapolation of the themes of the true life rather than as external to them. With regard to the question of the true life, what is involved is much more a sort of carnivalesque continuity of the theme than of a break with the received values of classical philosophy. Forgive me, I am going far from having fulfilled my contract and from having told you what I should have told you this week. I will try to finish with cynicism next week. Okay, that's the end of Lecture 6 of the Courage of the Truth lectures by Michel Foucault at the College of France, 1983-84.